So what I said to Todd was I was thinking about how important it is for us as parents to really build in a network for our kids to have as they're growing up. And I feel like the earlier the better. And when I say a network, it's not about that I'm trying to give parents more to do. This isn't like a go out and do more, like you have another job, go out and find people for your kids. It's the allowing of other people to love our kids. And I know I was thinking about this last night, and I know that there are some parents that have had experiences like traumatic experiences in their childhood or bad experiences with a coach or scary experiences with a teacher or other families or whatever it may be, or they read the news or the media and this freaks them out. So they often do the opposite with their kid. They'll be like, maybe not very trusting of other adults and a lot of.
I just want to interject that I think parents, specifically moms, have a kind of a rescuer or a hero putting everything on
them. Yes, there's a martyrdom.
And this is a discussion that I hope will help us all, because I certainly have a martyrdom in me. You definitely do.
Definitely.
That it doesn't all have to be, you don't have to be the only one doing this to support your kids.
Yeah. And let me finish this thought about parents who are like, I don't want my kids to be somewhere too long, or I don't trust this adult to be in charge of them, or I don't want my kids to ever spend the night anywhere else, or I don't trust a camp. There's all these, because oftentimes it's that parent's history, which is real.
Yeah.
Like, it's not me saying, oh, forget that. I understand that's a traumatic experience. And that's something where I am more leery about allowing my kids to do things. Understandable. But if you trust yourself and you talk to your kids about things, that boundaries for themselves, asking for help when they need it, having the ability to say no, and making sure they know that you'll be there if they feel afraid, or like, for example, let me just focus on one thing. I did allow my girls to have overnights. I can't remember what year we started that.
We probably started later for our oldest and
earlier for our youngest.
Up. Yeah.
But when they would be somewhere, if it was a slumber party, if it was just them with another friend or whatever, I would say, if you want to come home at any point, text me or have the parent call me, or would you like me to call at 9 and see how things are going? They didn't have a phone really early on, but there are so many ways that we can make sure that you are feeling safe in your environment. And I would follow through on those things. The reason why is we have to allow our kids to have some experiences where they can utilize the skills we're trying to teach them. Of course, we're not going to put them in dangerous situations on purpose. And hopefully we've vetted certain situations way ahead of time. So we're not feeling like every time we bring them to someone's house, we're unsure if they'll be unsafe. Like, hopefully they're family, friends, or people we know, and that we're trying to allow our kids to have experiences where they can ask for help if they need it, or they can do something different and trust themselves in an environment that's not their own home. Mm-hmm. And I think depending on the age of your kids, it's going to look different. Like the first couple overnights that our kids had were either with my sister, which was easy, or like our best friends. Mm-hmm. And so they had the experience of being away from home in an environment where we knew they were okay, where they knew they could ask the adults for help.
Yeah.
And then from there, if there was a slumber party moving up into adolescence, early teen years, they had a phone by then, but then they had this ability to know they could do it and also know they could leave if they needed to. So we're building this foundation inside of them over time. And the reason, and there's more that I have to say about that, but I have seen and talked to a lot of parents who are leery about doing any of that to make sure that their kid never has anything happen to them, which I understand. But if our kids never are away from us and they never have experiences with other families or like a camp or a weekend away, they can't build that in themselves. They can't trust themselves to manage it. Does that make sense, Todd?
Yeah. And there's times when parents want to bubble wrap their kids and save them from having
do.
any type of experience. There's times lawnmower parenting, whatever term you want
Right.
to use. And this is where I'll maybe be annoying to anybody who's younger who's listening. Back when we were growing up in the 70s and 80s, I don't know. I think our parents loved us just as much, but cared a little bit less to make sure that we were safe.
Different cultural norms.
Yeah. And whether it's, I just remember being on my own all the time, not all the time, but being on my own. And what's weird is we're the parents now, and we had that experience. I found value from having that experience. Yet at the same time, the default is think about how often we don't have any idea where our kids are.
I know.
It never happens.
I know.
Find Friends. We use Find Friends. There's a whole bunch of other apps out there. Back in the olden days, in the 1979 or 1982 or whatever, our parents, if we weren't in the house, they didn't really know where we were. And somehow we screwed that up. We protected them, I'm judging generationally, too much.
There's many reasons for that.
Okay.
One of them is media exposure. We now have access to every bad thing that happens everywhere all the time. We now have access to statistics about things that happen to kids. We now have stories of kids being harmed, or even our own history, maybe of molestation or unwanted touch. And we have all this information now that then lives in our brain as it's happening right this minute, that this is our reality. And a lot of that happened, Todd, that started with America's Most Wanted. It started with, what's John's name? Adam, when
Walsh.
Adam Walsh. So yeah, I'm not blaming John Walsh. I like that he started a show to help find people we couldn't find. But the whole Adam Walsh story really changed the dynamics of culture.
And what's weird about it is, I remember reading Julie Lythcott-Haim's book. She said, our kids are actually safer now than they were before. Now, what's weird is except at school.
Except
which is so messed up.
Oh my God. I can't even, it's so hard to even comment on that.
So the odds of somebody getting scooped up at a mall happened to poor Adam Walsh.
Is
happened more back in the 70s and the 80s than it does now. Yet we act as if there's danger around the corner.
Correct. And there's all these things, because there's also, who was I having this conversation with about societal norms and how I feel like someone I was emailing with, a mother I was emailing with, about part of the fear is that if something happens, we parents in this generation feel will be blamed. So the cultural norms have also shifted to, if anything happens to your kid, where were you?
Yeah.
And historically, it was when we were kids, I'm not saying our parents were never blamed for something, but it was typically like, what was that kid thinking? Or that person who hurt them, that's a person we're focusing on. Or things happen and we need to move forward. But there's such a culture. I just remember, this is a good decade ago, but kids who were walking down the street, who were going to go take the train, or they were going to go to the grocery store by themselves, and parents started to get over involved in, where are your parents? And then police would be called because the kids were left alone. And there's this new culture of hovering with our kids. And while we personally can't change that culture, I think within our own boundaries of our own home, we can allow our kids to have some experiences within reason, where we feel like there's somebody who cares about them as much as we do, or I don't know if that's possible, cares about them in a deep way, and allow them to have an experience where they can learn to trust themselves in new environments. And a few things that we can talk about personally, Todd, is we already talked about doing sleepovers. We also did, when I was a kid, I didn't go to camp, but my kids did go to camp.